Alrighty tighty folks, I think I'm going to be making a new intro soon. I just had an idea, so look forward to that. But today we're back in the shop in Arizona on the 4Runner. This was supposed to be the last video of the 4Runner, buttoning it back up, but this video taking a bunch of things apart ended up being quite a bit longer than I wanted it to be, so I had to cut it down. So look forward to at least one more video. I guess let's just jump into it. Step number one, loosening the torsion bars all the way. Because the torsion bars, giant piece of spring steel rod, runs from middle of the vehicle up forward to the upper control arms. Provides ride height. Well, they're pretty tight because they're spring steel, and they give you ride height. So we're gonna take them off first. The video is sort of backwards because I technically did the passenger side stuff first, but some of the bits in the driver side video, it just seemed right ordering them this way. It actually worked out better visually doing it this way. You can see there we're taking the upper ball joint bolt out. Nothing fits in there really but a wrench, so gotta do what you gotta do. I remember the last video looking at the hammer blows, and it's really strange to me. The hammer blows, when I look at them in the video, I'm like, come on, man, get your purse out, hit it with your purse. What are you doing? Come on. It looks like there's no force behind them, but the vibrating sensation in my arms says otherwise. I've seen a couple of people saying that you should never hit a hammer with a hammer because they're hardened, and I want to say Mythbusters did that already, and it doesn't do anything. It's not hardened enough that the steel really chips; it just deforms. Also, hitting a round-ish face onto a round face. Yeah. Trust me, I know. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. Okay? It worked. You see that it worked. It did the thing. If it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. For whatever reason, the driver's side inner fender sits substantially lower. Like there's no cutout in it, like there is in the passenger side. Like the passenger side, the cutout's there because of the fuel filter. The driver's side doesn't have a fuel filter, so there's no cutout. But the inner fender, the steel, is quite a bit lower and closer to the upper control arm. So you can see it's a little bit difficult to get kind of a tool in there. I would normally use my little extendo 1/2-inch ratchet to get in there. But you saw right there, I had to use 2 wrenches to bust the bolts loose. And even then, the 3/8 ratchet with the short socket was still a little bit close to the... They could have put it just a teensy bit higher. Good, I don't know, 5 or 6 centimeters would have been fine. And you could have fit a bigger tool in there to do these things. But I guess they wanted to keep, when they were designing it, they wanted to keep rocks and debris out of the engine bay as much as possible. That's why there's, a skid plate, and the steel comes down the way it does, and everything. The engine bay is sort of protected by a bunch of different things. So, it's probably one of the reasons they were so reliable, honestly. Just the little things Toyota did. See there, we pull the arm off. And I've got to tie the knuckle up so we don't tear the ABS wire or the brake line. I did test the ABS after all of this, just to be safe, because the sensors were a bit suspect to me. But I cleaned them off. You'll see that here in a minute. And the ABS works just fine. So we don't worry about it if it works, right? Pulled the shock off just to give me one less thing to worry about on the lower arm. You can see me there kind of checking it, see what kind of condition it was in. The shocks weren't in bad shape. I told him that whenever we were doing it. And he was just like, you know what, we're in there anyway. I already bought them. Screw it. Replace them. I don't care. I want everything to be perfect. Because he just bought this body. I think I mentioned it before in one of the previous videos. He bought this body from a a guy that was quote-unquote a mechanic. But that is neither here nor there. That's not the purpose of this video. The purpose is not to hate on other people. And I know I keep saying in various videos that my purpose is not necessarily to call people out and throw hate intentionally. That's not the purpose of the videos. But in education, we have to recognize where the problems exist so that we can educate better. So that we can get better, so that we can be better, so we know what's wrong, so we know how to do it right. Although I can tell you see that right there? That cotter pin. I have another section showing another cotter pin. But that cotter pin was way too small for the joint. Granted, as long as it stays in there and does a job, it doesn't really matter that much. But you should put the correct size cotter pin in for the application. It was also too short and not bent correctly. Again, as long as it stays in there and does the job, it doesn't matter, but the less correct of a part you use, the higher the chances are that it will fail. If that makes sense to you guys. So yeah, most of the things on the front end of this truck were either loose or all of the cotter pins were too short. There was one that wasn't even... Oh yeah, it was a steering. I showed you guys that one already. One of the cotter pins of the steering, it wasn't even long enough to bend over. It was just kind of in there. And I'm like, well, why would you even put this back in there? It makes no sense. Right on the passenger side, what I had to do was I had to pull... Because I wasn't pulling the torsion bars out of the vehicle, which is what the book says to do, or it says at least to pull the rear bracket and then pull the torsion bar back. You don't have to pull it off the frame, but, you know, remove it from the control arm. I did it sort of the other way around, where I pulled, you can see that bracket there that I'm pulling the bolts off of, and now I'm pulling the upper control arm bolts. I pulled the torsion bar bracket off of the arm, and you can see the bracket stays with the torsion bar, just because it was easy enough to do. It was... I saw the book said remove torsion bar, or disassemble the torsion bar thing and bring it backwards. I was like, well, I've got enough room. I don't really think I need to do that. The reason they tell you to do that in the first place is because putting it back in gets a little bit tricky on the driver's side. That's literally it. The passenger side, not an issue. Everything went back together just fine. You'll see that in one of the next videos. Again, we tie up the steering knuckle so that we don't apply too much pressure to the brake line there. So something I wanted to show you guys also was whoever put these brakes on, they put some, I don't know what this stuff is. It's a sealant or an anti-rattle material of some kind. As far as I have ever seen, all that anti-rattle stuff does is it makes future jobs harder. It doesn't, like, that's the reason for the clips. The clips prevent rattling. You apply pressure to something and it doesn't rattle. If your brakes are rattling, something else is wrong. You don't need to RTV your pads to the frickin' calipers. Also, we ended up pulling the brakes apart. The reason I did this the way I did is we weren't doing the brakes initially, and then we decided to do the brakes. You can see there is that little cotter pin that was just way too short, along with the one in the steering. It's all of the cotter pins in this truck were the same exact way. But we decided to do the brakes after I had already started taking apart the arms. So I figured, screw it, we'll continue taking apart the arms. Pulled the brake pads out just to check them and check the condition of the rotor on the backside. And we're like, yeah, well, I guess we're doing the brakes anyway. We already have the brake pads, might as well. You can see there the lower control arm was not really wanting to cooperate. And I can't tell you how many times I have seen those dust caps, those little dust caps on the end of the rotors there, damaged simply because the people doing the job couldn't be bothered to just take their time and do it correctly. I've seen it mostly where people take giant channel locks and they squeeze the ever-loving crap out of it and they just pound it back into place. Oh, it's fine. It ain't no problem. You'll see another rope on there. I did tie that up off camera. Sorry. Run. Not sure quite why I left 10 minutes of me talking to somebody else in, but it's there now. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Putting the new lower control arm up, and so I put the lower control arm on, and I mounted it to the lower ball joint there on the steering knuckle, which I did replace and didn't actually capture on camera. I promise I'll start doing better, guys. I swear to you, I will show you the things you guys need to see when doing this stuff. But me and my ADHD there doing something completely unrelated to the task that I had in my hand, pulling the sway bar bushing off the frame. It's fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. But back to what I was saying. I put the lower control arm on thinking that I would have the room in the joint to pull the CV axle out because we're replacing that CV axle. I thought I would have the space to pull that CV axle out with the lower arm on, and I tried that for 30 seconds or so before I realized, oh wait, no, the way you're supposed to do this is have the upper arm on and then put the lower arm on. I was going to tell you guys, oh yeah, you got to put the lower arm on to support it, and then I put the upper arm on. Like I was going to try to BS my way through it, but I didn't want to do that to you guys, you know. So I did a stupid, and then I realized I was stupid, and then I unstupided. You can see there, I stick a what is that, 1/4 inch, 12 inch or so extension in the cooling vanes of the rotor, and I let it jam up against the caliper bracket, and that stops the rotor from spinning. If you have a vented rotor, that is literally the simplest way. Leave the caliper bracket on, jam something up against it. Unless you're putting 300 foot-pounds of torque on something, you're not damaging the caliper bracket. It's fairly hard steel. You see me kind of fighting with the CV axle a little bit there. Didn't want to break free. That was that bit that I cut out that was me realizing I'm stupid. So we put the upper control arm on so that we can take the lower control arm off and get the CV axle out. That was me realizing that this upper control arm, those bolts had washers on them. They had split washers on them, which the factory didn't. Why are you changing what the factory did if the factory thing worked and there was no problem with it? I realized that what the problem was they put serrated flanged nuts on the torsion bar bracket. The flange of the nut was larger than the cutout of the torsion bar bracket, which means they had to space the nut with whatever they had on hand, presumably, which turned out to be split lock washers. Wow. Just phenomenal work, guys. This is why I'm not a huge fan of aftermarket parts, because they always tend to do it just a little bit wrong. And it just annoys the crap out of me. Like, for instance, the Civic. You cannot use a Dorman replacement coolant reservoir for the 92-95 Honda Civics because they molded it incorrect. It does not fit into the bracket on the radiator to hold it in place. It falls off. Dorman did it wrong. Anyway, ranting aside, we get the upper control arm on, not necessarily installed, it's not all torqued and everything, but we get it on so we can drop the lower. When we drop the lower, we now have enough room, we can pull the CV axle out. After realizing there's a little, I thought it was the bolt and the washer held the CV axle in place underneath the cap. That's not the case on these. There is a little clip inside the hub with a washer that holds the CV axle in place, and you'll see me here pulling that off. So I loosen the nut just to break it loose after removing the keeper washer, you know, order of operations. And I thought that the nut was, the ID was large enough to come off over the washer, and I was going to pull the whole hub off first. Again, realizing I was stupid, and that, of course, obviously the clip in the it wouldn't do anything if it came off the second. It's whatever. It's fine. Grabbed a couple of picks, pulled the clip, pulled the washer. Jobs are good. And this is what I've talked about before, where I have done Toyota front spindles before. I have done them. I don't remember doing them. I don't remember every part that needs to come off. I don't, remember for sure how the thing's built every time I get in there. It's exploration, right? That's 85% of what a technician will do is explorate. It's fun and it's interesting. Come lads, we're going on an adventure. You know, that kind of thing. Where the lads are, I guess, your tools, and the adventure is getting dirty and your body hurts. It's not as glamorous as it seems. You know, looking at this obviously glamorous thing that I'm doing here. I put the lower control arm back up just so that I could have something to support the caliper on, and the caliper didn't want to cooperate. Going back to the caliper, I was talking earlier, the hard line goes through a bracket that's bolted to the spindle with big bolts. They're big bolts. And it's a complete loop. To pull the loop off the brake line, you have to pull the brake line off the caliper. So what I ended up doing there, what you see is the rubber brake line is pretty loose. It's dangling from the hard brake line, so there's no major issues. We got the bolts out of the rotor that held it to the hub, and then the hub was kind of dirty and crusty, so it didn't want to cooperate. But give it some light little love taps, and comes right out. This is what I was talking about earlier with there was so much crap on the back of this spindle that I couldn't even see that there was an ABS sensor. Like it was just whatever it was rubbing up against the rotor, right? All of that crap. So we're sticking the new CV axle in, and I cut the 5 minutes of me fighting with it because that was just annoying. I don't even know why I was fighting with it. For whatever reason, it didn't want to go up in the hole. That'll be it for this one, guys. As always, don't forget to like it, subscribe it, crank it, and rip it. And we will see you in the next one.